I'd be very curious to know in your own methodology while you were in the process of writing this book. I know you've created a few great techniques to reframing, especially on this aspect of scarcity. So the question I initially had was, are there ways to create more,
Uh,
scarcity or getting people to actually take action without feeling slimy?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I remember now what your initial question was on urgency. So, how do we create urgency without using these kind of crude techniques of, you got to buy this now or it's gone? Well, the key is in your prospect. If you really understand your prospect, you really understand their world, and I don't mean a surface level on what they're saying, I'm talking about what's behind what they're saying. If you're able to connect the dots, because by definition, if they are speaking to you, they have a reason to do something. They have a pain, they have a problem that needs a solution, it needs resolution. So, by definition, the fact that they're on the phone means that they have something for you to discover. And the game of a high ticket sales call, it is absolutely a game, by the way, is you to uncover that pain and that problem. And the way that we do that is by using well crafted questions that really cut through the surface and really get into the subconscious mind of the prospect, so he really unravels all of his pains, his problems and issues and concerns. Now, the way that we create urgency is, first we need to identify the problem, then the pain that comes from the problem. So in the book, we go through this, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at the prospect's world, and we're drawing out the friction, the pain that the prospect's world creates because of where they are. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take that, and ultimately the way that we create urgency is through fear. Fear that their trajectory will get worse. That's how you create urgency. It's not enough to just identify the problem and the pain. The reason for that is because they're managing it. They're not going to jump out the window if they don't buy your product, right? They're managing it. But it is the job of the high ticket closer to get them to have this introspection, to understand that the trajectory is going to be far worse from where they are. And it is that creates the urgency and action. So that's how, and you see, now that's easier said than done. So Jason, do you see why people opt for well, if you buy this now, it's half the price? Because it's easy. It's easy to do that, right? You just utter a few sentences. But what I'm suggesting requires a hell of a lot of skill and exploration and sophistication. That is why. That is why people opt for the cheap and crude way of creating urgency rather than this.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're suggesting actually puts a lot of responsibility on the seller because it's based on how you were able to understand the buyer that you can actually explain to them how their situation is getting worse. You're not lying to them, you're not saying anything untrue, but because you spent the time to actually fully understand them and take that risk of saying like, hey, I don't think this is getting better. You're just managing, but we can get you thriving. And that requires confidence. That requires studying. That requires a sophisticated method. And I believe that's what you're preaching for. And so I'd be curious to know when you preach a methodology like this whole responsibility that comes with you going and leading people towards this change, does it make some people become a little more afraid of selling themselves because of the burden of responsibility?
It is absolutely something that people have to take extremely seriously, because this is a very, very powerful approach, and it can be abused. It can be abused. And, as we know from the Spider-Man movie, with great power comes great responsibility. And this can be abused like any other tool. So what the impression that I get from salespeople when I introduce them to my method is wow, like this is crazy stuff, like what you can absolutely achieve. Now, there needs to be some ethical consideration here. And what I teach my sales guys is that my closers, that this is not about creating you yourself creating the pain and problem and urgency. I'm not trying to manipulate them to look at their life in the way that I want them to look at it. All I'm doing is helping them unravel the reality of their world right now. That's all I'm doing. I'm getting them to focus. Look, human beings, and I always say this, human beings, we have a mechanism to continue with our lives. And that is denialism. We have lots of issues, lots of problems, and the way to live and just continue is not to look at those problems and put them, in the back of our minds. That is destructive for someone's growth, right? Our job as closers is focus. We are focus agents. We want them to focus on certain aspects of their life. And in this particular situation, we want them to focus on all that's wrong in their world, right? So what we're trying to do here is not create something that's not there. I'm trying to unravel it. And that's where the skill comes in.
You just have to look at the fact that we still have so many millions of people that smoke cigarettes every day. And it's not like we lack knowledge to make a decision to quit smoking, but it's just like you said, this denialism kind of kicks in and you kind of just cope with it. You kind of just deal with it. It's not that painful, but fast forward a few years and now you have these health problems. And, if you did have somebody who understood, who cared and really knew how to actually make you make a change for the better, could actually unravel that for you, it might actually help some people to be able to make those powerful decisions. And I think in particularly these intangible B2C types of programs that give personal transformation, that get people to recognize blocks, get consultation, get breakthroughs, it's not as obvious as some of the more tangible business solutions that you can measure. You can get a clear ROI, you can weigh it out. And so that understanding becomes such a critical part of the sales process. And I know it's a big element within the inverse sales method is actually going out and asking powerful questions. Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.